Welcome to episode 180 of the XS Noize Podcast. I'm Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. In this episode, I speak to Tim Booth, lead singer from James, about their latest album, Yummy, and his debut novel, When I Died for the First Time. If you missed the previous episode, I spoke to iconic producer Arthur Baker. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, please subscribe on your favourite listening platform, give us a rating, and leave a comment. James have released their 18th studio album, Yummy, which reached number 1 on the UK albums chart after 42 years in the music industry. And in March, Tim Booth published his first novel, When I Died for the First Time. In this interview, Tim discusses the writing and recording of Yummy, upcoming live shows, writing his first novel, and lots more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Tim Booth from James. So hi Tim, welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
How are you doing?
Very good, very good. You've recently published your first novel, When I Died for the First Time. It's a dark comedy about the character Seth Breaks, who's also a musician. So what inspired you to write the book?
42 years of being in a band in this, in the world that I operate. I suspect the more traumatic aspects of being in a band. But it is a dark comedy, but it's the emphasis of the word dark, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you know. And I've kind of glided through it as a sober person, you know, until about 6 years ago, I really didn't take anything at all, because I had an inherited liver disease. So I've been in a weird position of being a singer in a band who's remained sober, generally hasn't touched the goods. It's slightly changed in the last 6 years, with psychedelic therapy work that I've done, or working with shamans. But until then, you know, it was all about meditation and going to altered states through dancing rather than in drinking something. And that's reflected in the book. It's a singer who can't help himself, who's struggling with his desire and his addictions.
And when did you start writing the book? When was the initial idea and you went, I'm going to have to sit down, I have an idea, I want to get it down? Because I'm sure I hear it was a long process.
Yeah, over 10 years. I knew that I'd have an audience of James fans. So I didn't want it to be like, oh, it's quite good for a first novel. I kind of wanted it to be really tight and read like a thriller. So I rewrote it and worked over 10 years working on it. The initial idea actually came probably 28 years ago, but loosely, you know, where you go, oh, that would be a great idea for a novel. And then you forget about it. But the solid work's been done in the last 10 years.
When you were writing the book, did you have to discipline yourself for the writing as you would for when you're writing lyrics for an album? Much
more. You know, the initial writing is a slog. You just can't, you know, I often wake at 4 or 5 in the morning, and it's a good time for me to write, and I get up and do a few hours and then go back to bed again after that. That was often a habit. There was 1 year and a half where I couldn't write a word. I literally couldn't pick it up, didn't touch it, thought I'd lost it, and then came back to it. You know, when I do write it, it's a struggle to keep yourself focused. I think especially in this day, you know, especially when you're writing on a computer where you suddenly have access, you start researching something, you have a question. Do crematoriums allow you to watch people burn? And you look it up and suddenly you're down a rabbit hole and you spent the morning researching rather than writing.
Did you get the same enjoyment from writing the book as you would for writing lyrics?
No, writing lyrics is more fun, definitely. You get instant gratification. You get to sing it to people instantly. Doing a book for 10 years, it's like people ask you what you're doing. You say, I'm writing a book, but you can't really show them 3 minutes, you know. it's like you're walking through the desert with a backpack on your own, and you might not make it through. You might not make it through. And lots of people talk about writing books. So it was hard. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And although meditation comes close, another difficult act.
I suppose when you're writing a book, it has to come from your head. But when you're writing lyrics, you're getting inspiration from the music that's presented, from the band, from the jams. So it'd be a bit easier.
It's not that. It's the length, and it's solo. We were with each other, and as I say, it's instant gratification. We get to play the songs to people and see the reaction, and tailor the song if we think that it's not quite right. But 450 pages, and originally I've had it at one point 850 pages, this book, and I whittled it down to make it flow better, to make it sharper, and to make it a page turner, hopefully. But that is laborious, and I'm on my own, and you lose perspective. Like, again, bands have producers. And we have each other. We trust each other to tell each other what's wrong or what's right with a song.
So how pleased were you when you had the physical finished published version in your hands? How did that feel?
I was in shock. I filmed the unboxing, which the book company asked me to do, and I didn't post it for about 6 days because I just couldn't quite understand what this thing was I had in my hand. It just was so confusing after such a long time. Now I feel really proud of it. I've had a lot of people come back to me and say they read it in 2 days or they read it through the night, and people I trust, who are really shocked by it, in a positive way. I sent it to the producer of Lost in Translation, and he went crazy for it. I was able to actually use his quote on the back of the book because he was just blown away by it. So, so I'm really proud of it now because I know that it's not going to be for everyone, but the people it will reach, it will reach.
And do you plan to explore the character of Seth Breaks in another book?
Possibly. I'm going to see. I'll tell you in about 6 months' time. I've had quite a lot of struggle with the book company. I did all these signings and they ran out of books, and you can't get the book in Waterstones and you can't get the book in. It's like they haven't really supported it. I don't think they realized it would sell as well as it did, and it has. And so they've run out. So it can't actually do as well as it possibly could do, which is very annoying.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. But what I have done is listen to your latest album hundreds of times so far. So congratulations on your 18th studio album, Yummy, reaching #1 in the UK albums chart after 42 years in the music industry. Now, I've been a fan of the band since the 80s, and I was over the moon. So how did you and the band feel?
Surprisingly very happy. And I mean surprisingly because music's not a competitive sport, and we don't make music to get a #1 album. And most of my favorite bands, or many of them, never did. We don't really write music to have hits. We go fishing and we see what music comes, and then every so often we get a single, and someone goes, "Oh, that's a single," and we go, "Oh, okay, great, good luck." James are not a single band; we're an album band, and so it's all. And I like that attitude. It means we stay innocent. We stay trusting in inspiration and in the muses and in fate. I know many writers who write to have hits and write to have #1s. And especially now, that's 98% of the music industry is writing to become celebrities or famous. It's not been our path. So a #1, I'm proud of our #2s and our #3s and our #4s. It's like we had a double album last year that went to, I think, #2, which was wild. But I get other people see the #1 as an important figure, And it means when they do compilations of the number ones of 2024, it will be included. I like that. I'm very happy about that piece of information. It pissed me off when Sit Down was never included in those compilations. But that's other people's obsession with numbers, with success. We just want to keep making music and playing and keep inspiring ourselves and keep our standards high, which is what we aim for.
And you certainly have with this album. Did you go into the recording of Yummy with any preconceived ideas how you wanted it to sound and the kind of songs you wanted to write about?
4 of us go in a room, take nothing with us, improvise. We hired a cottage in Yorkshire Dales, beautiful landscape that fed us, and we jam for 2.5 weeks, 6 hours a day, and we come up with a load of jams, and then we go back over them, sift through them, see what's worth developing, which bits to move forward. Any 4 of us can take any jam and work on it into a song, work it into a song. And that's our process. And it's been our process for nearly 40 odd years. Other people don't write like that. It's I can say it to you. And in fact, when you read it in the book, you might get a better idea of it. That's partly, I think, one of my reasons for writing the novel was I wanted to show the creative process, because we always say, we jam songs out of nothing, and nobody really understands what that means. I think when you see the Beatles documentary and you see Paul McCartney strumming some chords and he gets Hey Jude, and you get it in that moment, you go, holy cow, where did that come from? That's the magic. That's incredible. And as a band, you never get to share that with anybody. That holy cow moment. And so, yeah, I've got that a bit in the book, I think, because I wanted that demonstrated in graphic, in the here and now.
Fans can sort of get a sense of how you work in a way with, you put out the Wah Wah album, and then there's the Bonus Pudding album, which is all about all demos, and it sort of gives you a slight insight into how you work.
We had a rich crop for Yummy. And so it was like, do you want to put out a second album of the tracks that didn't make it? And we listened back to them. We went, oh yeah, fuck, there's some good ones here.
Yeah.
That we dropped a year ago, didn't pursue them over a year ago. So we put that out, Pudding, to go with the Yummy Pudding. And we're thinking of doing some gigs where we just improvise. Which would be scary and maybe not entertaining, but an interesting process, particularly for musicians to be part of and watch. Because this singer-songwriter thing can get very limited. Most bands, I feel, only have singer-songwriters have 1 or 2 albums in them. And then you're kind of heard what they're doing. But when you improvise with 4 of you, there's an exponential increase of not knowing what's going to happen. There's so many random factors involved, exponentially, because you've got more people. That magic can happen in ways that no one is planning. Nobody is controlling it in James.
So you're based in the US, and Yummy's, it's the 6th James album in 10 years. The band's so prolific. So how do you get organized to get all together? You coming over from the US and everybody spread across the UK. Who's the member of the band who says, right, guys, let's make another record?
It's not like that. Picasso doesn't stop painting paintings because he sold one. You know what I mean? It's like he's always painting. So the week after Yummy, we were in the Yorkshire Dales recording a week's worth of jams. When I'm in Britain, the bit where we have to be in the same location is the initial jamming. So when I'm in Britain, we get together for a few weeks and we jam, and then we can take the material. I can be in America and they can be in England until we have to come together to record, and until we come together to play, until we come together to tour. But I've been in Britain for 1.5 years, 2 years now, partly because of the book, really, and the albums. We had a double orchestral album, and we had Yummy all within the space of 2 years, and the novel. So I figured I needed to sort of land and be in one place and really work hard and be around. So it's been a bit different the last year and a half. I don't know where I'm going to end up, but that's what it's been like for the last year and a half.
And the last few albums, you have the two new members, Debbie and Chloe. So what do they bring to the band?
They've really woken us up. I think there's a lyric in Butterfly. She found him sleeping in a pile of dead leaves. They've balanced us out. They've added something that we didn't know we were missing. They're a joy to be with and have on stage in terms of charisma and energy. I think one of the major sonic changes that you can hear in Yummy is Chloe's remarkable backing vocals. We're giving them more and more power because every time we do, they step up, both of them. And, it's not like a boyfriend inviting a girlfriend to move in with him and then doesn't empty the closet and give her space. We're giving them space, and we want them to have more space because they've really brought something wonderful to the band. They have an appointment. As much as anyone in this band is meant to be in this band, they are.
No, they're definitely a great addition. There's so many great tracks on the album. Do you mind to talk about a couple of my favourites? Life's a Fucking Miracle. It's so joyful. I love it. What can you tell me about the genesis of that track?
I mean, I can speak to you lyrically about it. I mean, I don't know. It's Jimmy took that jam, I think, with his brother and worked on it. And it's kind of disco-y. It's got an amazing bass line in the chorus. And then Chloe put some amazing backing vocal that could easily be missed. That's nuts. If you take it out of context, she's kind of going, whoa, whoa. And it's kind of mad backing vocal. And it just helps the chorus just pop. That probably, the combination of those two probably inspired that lyric. I can't remember if I had it in the initial jam. I could have done, but I think it came on hearing the kind of joy in the bass line and the backing vocals and going, fuck yes, life's a fucking miracle. We're made of light. Our form is physical. That's the line everyone doesn't quite get. We're made of light. Our form is physical. That's one of my favorite lines. Well, it's a very inclusive track. It's a James inclusivity track of like everybody welcome into this crazy magic bus that is James. We're very joyful nowadays. I think the women have allowed us to stop trying to be tortured artists and embrace the actual joy of what we're doing a bit more head on.
My favorite track on the album is Mobile God, a song written from the perspective of a smartphone. I love the lyric. I'm the last thing you stroke in the evening before bed. I'm the lover you touch in the morning in your bed.
Yeah. It's sad, isn't it? Look where we've got to. It's there was a survey done of people under 30, I think, and something like 45% of them said they would prefer to lose a finger than lose the ability to use their mobile phone. And we are becoming cyborgs. And Elon Musk has spotted that, which is why he's developing Neuralink, where he's trying to put that ability to go online in our brains, implant it in our brains, to give everyone access to being cyborgs very directly without the interface of having to hold up this clunky thing to our ears. And it's a massive transformation in humanity. And we don't really know what we're doing. We have no idea what we're doing because it's an evolutionary step. But whether it's for better or worse, tends to be depend upon your perspective and your age. But it's obviously up for debate.
And how do you feel when you're on stage performing at gigs and there's people starting watching the gig through a mobile phone?
Quite a bit of the time, I'm okay with it. And then if I go to the barrier to go and see the audience and just to feel the phones come up in my face, I can't come to the barrier. So it affects my performance. If I want to stage dive, there's people, they want to film me and carry me with one hand. And that's unsafe. I can't do that. It's a trust exercise when I held on a barrier, or when I allow myself to go into the audience, and the trust is broken when people just want to do it one-handed and film it because it's too dangerous. So it will affect the performance and prevent me from interreacting in the way that we did. So in the way that I can. So, I think we're going to have announcements before the gigs of James' humbly request that you put your phone away and bring it out for one or two songs. The other thing is, as somebody who's meditated for 42 years, it's all about attention, presence. And the minute you bring out a phone, you've split your attention. So you won't get as good a gig. You won't get as good as a gig from us, because we are partly feeding off your attention. And we are hopefully sending that music that we create from your attention back to you. And then you send it back to us. And it becomes this reciprocal battery that we can get very high together. But lots of mobile phones, that takes us out of the present.
Yeah, people need to live in the moment at gigs.
I think more and more, but some of it I fully understand, that you want a memory, but I just think maybe we need to focus it on one or two songs. Like Mobile Gods will be the one where I invite people to get their phones out.
What song on the album means the most to you? What would be your favorite at the moment?
They're all my babies, man. That's like asking you to name your favorite child, Don't like being asked that question. Or if I do, I'd probably direct you to Folks, probably the most neglected song, The Neglected Child, the one at the end. I wrote that lyric very quickly, which is a good sign. It's about death, of course. The last number of albums, I seem to have been writing my way into a relationship with death. You in your country, you meet it much more head on, say, than in England, with a wake, with an open casket in one side of the divide. But in this country, death is just something brushed under the carpet, and nobody wants to face it or meet it. And yet, it's clearly is a fact of life that we're all going to die, as much as we are all born. And it needs to be met in the similar way to me. And when my mother died in my arms, it was so obviously a birth that I think there's a lot to celebrate in death. And I discovered that. So lots of the last few albums have been me, I think, trying to get a handle on it to some degree on quite a few songs. Zero is one of my favorite songs of the last 10 years in James. And that's a very strong song about death.
James have released 17 albums prior to Yummy. Now, I'm going to mention some that mean a lot to me. And can you tell me briefly what comes into your head when I mention each one? So we'll start with 7.
The backlash that followed Gold Mother, critical backlash, kind of knew it was coming, knew that The Enemy and all those music magazines were very secular. And they suddenly bigged us up around Gold Mother when we had all that success. And so I knew that 7 we'd get panned for. And I also knew it was a great record. But in those days, to become a stadium band was a dirty word. And that album, they accused us of trying to become a stadium band. And it wasn't true. We actually turned down working with Steve Lillywhite on that record, who wanted to be the producer. And we chose Youth because he'd done some crazy low-key records that we liked. But it just happened to ended up sounding quite a big record. But it was definitely a very mature record. I think I'm proud of everything on that record.
Yeah, after hearing Sit Down, and then you released 7. 7 was my entry point to James. I knew, some of the singles, but that was the album that made me go, right, this is these guys are the real deal.
Thanks.
Whiplash.
I go to the fact I got whiplash on about the 3rd gig of that tour, and was in a neck brace for 2.5 years and disabled. Couldn't carry a shopping bag, and learned never to call an album with such a negative title ever again. As a band, we were starting to fall apart a bit in that time period. It was a rough time period, and I was ill, physically damaged, really. So things were starting musically. I was pretty happy with the record. A little overproduced. I think Stephen Hague probably wouldn't have been my first choice, or Brian would have been my first choice. He oversaw it, helped us with the arrangements, but Stephen Hague's production. But lots of great songs on there.
And Brian, you mentioned Brian. Brian Eno said that, James are the best band he's ever worked with, which is really something, isn't it?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I thought I don't know if he ever said that publicly. Has he said that publicly? I think okay.
I think it was on liner notes for one of the best of albums. I read that.
Great. Well, that's very sweet. Yeah, of course. I mean, to us, that's probably the most. We couldn't hear something more joyful to our ears because Brian was our favorite producer and our someone who just inspired us, from his ambient music to his productions to his other type of music. I mean, just the guy's been incredible. So to hear that from him is amazing for us.
And from the negativity of the title of Whiplash, we'll go to Millionaires.
Again, we were having a rough time within the band, so it slightly colours my ability to enjoy the record. But and again, we were a dysfunctional band. Addictions were at their worst at that point, and yet we managed to make a really great record, which Brian was astonishing holding that ship. But yeah, that has more bittersweet memories. Again, both those two records have bittersweet memories for me. And I know they're many people's favorites, so it's like, go figure.
That's why I mentioned them. The comeback album, Hey Ma.
Wonderful. We got Lee Baker, who produced my so-called solo records. They're not solo records. He played nearly every instrument on those records. Amazing musician, artist, friend. He produced us, and he was brilliant at navigating a band coming back together and trying to find a new language to speak to each other and work with each other. And it took a while. We built a studio in a chateau in France. I love that record. I think most of these records, I hope that there isn't a filler. We don't do fillers. We'll tend to jam at least 100 jams, and then choose the best 14 to work on. And that way we avoid filler. And then usually there's another 10 that could have been worked on. So Hey Ma's a rich record. Bubbles, I would direct someone to Bubbles if they want to hear a particular track. It's one of my favorites about my son, but it's also somehow about the death of Tony Wilson. It's connected to Tony's death. Yeah, so that has a lot of emotional resonance for me.
Since you got back together, you've made 9 amazing albums, and it blows my mind to think that James would never have recorded those albums if you'd never got back together, and fans would never have heard them. Yeah,
it was a good move, and we had no intention of coming back together. It was we had really finished, and then Jimmy and Larry approached me, and I said no. And then I saw Springsteen, and he'd reformed the E Street Band after 15 years. And it was one of the greatest gigs I'd ever seen. Changed all the songs, reapproached the songs. And it was like, oh my God, you can do this. You can come back and be a viable, artistic, creative, living entity again. You don't have to look backwards in a bad way. And so when they approached me a year later, I was curious, and I said, let's meet in a rehearsal room and jam some songs, because that's our best language, and see what we get. We then brought the others in, and it was piece by piece, and we've been communicating better ever since and enjoying it more and more as it's gone on. So we keep going because we've been loving it more.
If I was to make a playlist of the best James songs. If people want to understand the music of James, what are the 5 songs they should listen to?
But you're doing the thing again with the babies. You're just phrasing it in a different way. You've been sneaky here.
But I do ask that at every interview, because I do always make a playlist of 5 tracks of people that I've interviewed.
Well, I'm going to give you songs which I'll give you obscure songs. I won't give you set songs to sell us. Okay?
Yeah, some deep cuts.
So I'd say Zero. Okay, I'd say All the Colors of You. I'd say Nothing But Love. I'd say Quicken the Dead. I'd say Bubbles, mainly deep cuts, a couple of singles in there.
In celebration of the band's 40th anniversary last year, you've received the Ivor Novello Award for PRS Music Icon. So how did that feel?
I'm afraid it goes with the number one territory of I don't know if you've ever seen Doris Lessing receive the Nobel Prize for Literature at 90. She arrives in a taxi from Safeways with all her shopping and her autistic son, and the world's press is gathered outside her house, and she gets out and she goes, "What's happened?" And they go, "Oh, Miss Lessing, you haven't heard that you've been awarded the Nobel Prize?" And she goes, "Oh God." It's kind of one of the most amazing moments of, she was my heroine. I read probably 20 of her books. I adored that woman. And, the Novello Award was good because it came from songwriters. And it was lovely of them. I was sick when we got the award, unfortunately. And so it passed in a bit of a daze to me. I didn't I regretted the speech. I gave a crap speech because I was sick. But it was, it was nice to be recognized by songwriters' peers. But again, it's not about that. I have many friends who've turned down, is it OBs, the MBs,
Yeah.
They're just not interested. I understand that position.
Well, the band are heading out on tour in June. You're going to be rehearsing today. How much are you looking forward to getting out back on the road? I think it's your biggest ever arena UK tour. Is that right?
In terms of tickets sold, it's the biggest ever. That means more to me. It means more to me that more people want to see James now than they did in the 90s when we were so-called famous. And yet we don't get half the profile because we're old fuckers. And so it's kind of, that's really satisfying. Really satisfying. And that aspect of the album going to number 1 is really satisfying, that we don't get much attention compared with in the 90s. Everyone wanted to talk to us and take our photo and put us on front cover of magazines and all that bullshit. Now, quite rightly, they don't want to, but we're bigger. And we're bigger because of the music and because of the reputation of the live gigs. The live gigs are massive celebrations. And so all of that is wonderful. And in that sense, I have to acknowledge that, getting a number 1 or being awarded the Icon Award, that helps. The business looks at you differently. The business goes, "Oh, where did that come from? Oh, they're still making good music. That's unusual." And so, it's kind of cool. Yeah, it's cool. And I'm a bit, I'm sick today with a cold, so I'm probably a little bit more low key on these things than I would normally be.
You never stick to a set list every night. You rotate the set list. So how hard is that to prepare for and rehearse?
We don't rehearse. Maybe in the sound check, I'll say, who can play this song? And if someone says no, then we run through it in the sound check. If I'm thinking that we're going to try a song that evening that we haven't played in 3 years, and we'll run through it. And if it's close, we'll play it. Because when you play in front of an audience, something else kicks in. We don't rotate enough because we don't rehearse enough. This rehearsal's really important to us, and I'm missing this one right now because I'm not well. The rotation is it's a little hard, especially like if you're rushing and you say, oh shit, I've got to write a set list tonight. And I'll look up what we played last time we were in that city, and I'll try and tune into what the vibe is that night, whether it's a hot day or cold day, or it's a Monday or a Saturday, because people want different music depending upon what's going on in the world, in their world. And I'm trying to get a set list that might reflect that in a certain way, or reflect us in a certain way. And then I'll put it past some of the band members and tinker it. So it's a bit of a pain in the ass in some ways. Well, it takes time, but it also means that we go on stage fresh. We never know what's going to happen. It means there's an element of excitement every time we hit the stage. And we're looking for a magic gig every night. We're looking to give people the most amazing concert, not necessarily what they thought they were coming to hear, but in fact, the more unexpected it is, the better. You know, what my favorite gigs are the ones where people go away going, fuck, that was amazing. And then they go home and they go, they didn't play Sit Down, the bastards. Or they didn't play Sometimes, or Laid, or damn, you know, and they've had an amazing gig and they forgot about it because it was so amazing. And only that small mind that grasps onto, I want to hear this, you know, kicks in later.
If you could go back and relive one musical moment from your career, what would it be?
I love it all. It's you know, people go, what was your favorite gig? Gosh, like every gig, it's like 19 out of 20 are amazing experiences for us. And the 1 out of 20 is usually because the sound wasn't good that night, or, you know, someone was ill. 19 out of 20, we come off stage ecstatic, unable to sleep till 4 a.m. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. There's too many highs. We've been incredibly blessed as a band to have worked with Brian Eno on 5 albums. Brian oversaw Yummy. He was like, I asked him if he'd oversee it if anything went wrong. Nothing went wrong. So he didn't really oversee it, but he was there. He helped us on tracks from the last few albums, Nothing But Love. He had a hand in. When we get stuck, I just go to him and go, Brian, what's wrong with this song? You know, I feel like we're just blessed and we love what we do passionately. I know so many great musicians in shit bands, and they know it. They know they're pimping. They know they bring them money home for their family and they need it, but they're not inspired. Or I'm inspired every day by the people I work with, and I love what I do. So I can't give you one.
No problem. Well, we'll leave it at that, Tim.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Well, I hope you get better soon, Tim.
Thanks.
Take it easy. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.